Queen Zephyra stood on the balcony of her crystal palace, watching the stars flicker with warning lights. Each red flash meant another battle somewhere in her empire. Each yellow pulse showed ships moving toward war positions. The galaxy was breaking apart, and she was running out of time. Her silver skin glowed with worry as she touched the communication device on her wrist. 7 different alien kings appeared as small blue images in front of her. Their faces showed anger, fear, and hatred. "The Krillian ships crossed our border again," growled King Rex. His insect-like face clicked with rage. "My warriors demand blood payment." "Your warriors are fools," hissed Prime Conductor Azal of the Nexari. His energy form shifted between colors as his anger grew. "We have the power to bend space itself. Test us and watch your worlds disappear." Queen Zephyra raised her hand for silence, but the arguing continued. The Deshan collective sang their displeasure in crystal voices that made the air vibrate. The molten clans roared with voices like volcanic eruptions. The Void Hunters said nothing, but their dark ships moved closer to everyone's territories. This was the 3rd meeting this week. Each one ended the same way, with threats and no solutions. The peace accord that had kept the galaxy safe for 200 years was crumbling. Soon, there would be war on a scale that could destroy entire star systems. "Enough!" Zephyra's voice carried the authority of someone who ruled 1,000 worlds. The holograms fell silent. "We need a new solution. Something that binds us together instead of driving us apart." King Rex laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What solution? We have tried everything. Trade agreements, defense pacts, shared territories. Nothing works when trust is dead." Zephyra looked at the small image in the corner of her display. Ambassador Sarah Chun from Earth sat quietly, taking notes on a simple electronic tablet. Humans had only made contact with the galaxy 3 years ago, but they had earned observer status through something remarkable. They could talk to anyone. During first contact, every alien species had needed translators and cultural experts to speak with each other. Humans learned to communicate with all of them within months. They understood body language, voice tones, and social customs faster than species with telepathic abilities. "Ambassador Chun," Zephyra said, "you have been quiet. Your species is new to galactic politics, but you have shown wisdom before. What do you suggest?" Sarah Chun looked up from her tablet. She was small compared to most beings in the galaxy, with brown skin and dark hair pulled back simply. She wore a plain blue uniform with no weapons or energy shields. "Your Majesty," Sarah said in careful, clear words, on Earth, when tribes or nations could not stop fighting, they sometimes used marriage to create peace. When families joined through marriage, it became harder to make war. The cost became too high. The alien kings made various sounds of confusion and disgust. King Rex's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Marriage? You suggest we breed with our enemies?" "Not breeding," Sarah continued calmly. "Political marriage. A symbol of unity that creates real consequences for breaking peace. When families are joined, war hurts everyone involved." Prime Conductor Azul's energy form flickered with amusement. "Human, you do not understand. Our species cannot intermarry. We are too different. Nexari are pure energy. Krillians are biomechanical. Deshans are crystal-based life forms. This is impossible." Sarah nodded. "You are right. Most of your species cannot marry each other. But the marriage does not need to produce children. It needs to produce commitment." Queen Zephyra felt something stir in her mind. An idea forming like a star being born. "Continue, Ambassador." "The marriage would be symbolic but real," Sarah explained. 2 leaders join together, representing their peoples. If war comes, it breaks the family bond. The cost becomes personal, not just political. The Molten Clan chief spoke in a voice like distant thunder. Who would marry whom? None of us trust each other enough for such a bond. Sarah looked directly at Queen Zephyra. Your Majesty rules the largest empire and commands the most respect. If you were to marry a representative from a neutral party, it could create a new kind of alliance. A neutral party? Zephyra asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Earth requests permission to offer a candidate, Sarah said formally. We have no territorial claims in your conflicts. We want only peace and friendship with all peoples. The silence that followed was complete. Even the background hum of the communication system seemed to pause. King Vrex was the first to break it with laughter. A human? He wheezed between clicks. You suggest our great queen marry one of your primitive species. Humans have no energy manipulation, no psychic powers, no natural weapons. They cannot even fly without machines. Prime Conductor Azal's form brightened with what looked like amusement. This is absurd. Humans have been in space for less than a century. They have no great fleets, no planet killers, no reality-bending technology. What could such a marriage possibly symbolize? But Queen Zephyra was thinking deeply. She had met humans before, and something about them was different. They had no great powers, but they had something else. They could understand everyone. They could find common ground where others saw only differences. Who would you offer as a candidate? She asked. Sarah checked her tablet. Marcus Rivera. He was a military engineer who helped design our first starships. Now he works in diplomacy and cultural exchange. He has studied all of your civilizations and speaks 12 different alien languages. A military engineer? King Vrex's voice carried new interest. At least he understands war. Former military, Sarah corrected. He builds bridges now, not weapons. Queen Zephyra made her decision. The galaxy was dying slowly through endless conflict. Traditional solutions had failed. Perhaps it was time for something unprecedented. I accept this proposal, she announced. The alien kings made various sounds of shock and disbelief. If Marcus Rivera agrees, and if this marriage can truly create binding peace, then I will take this risk. King Vrex stopped laughing. You cannot be serious, Your Majesty. I am completely serious, Zephyra replied. We will gather on neutral ground for this ceremony. All kingdoms will witness it. All kingdoms will be bound by what it represents. And if any of you have a better solution, present it now. No one spoke. The weight of desperation hung over them all like a dark cloud. Then it is decided, Queen Zephyra said. Ambassador Chun, please ask Marcus Rivera if he will accept this responsibility. The fate of the galaxy may depend on his answer. As the communication ended and the holograms faded, Zephyra remained on her balcony, watching the warning lights flicker among the stars. She had just agreed to marry an alien from a species most people considered primitive. But something in her mind whispered that humans might be more than they appeared. She hoped she was right. The alternative was war that would burn the galaxy to ash. The neutral moon of Asphodai had never seen such a gathering. 7 different fleets hung in space around the small world, their ships gleaming like deadly jewels against the stars. Each fleet represented a different alien kingdom, each one capable of destroying planets. On the moon's surface, a great ceremonial complex had been built in just 2 weeks. It combined architectural styles from all the major species, crystal towers from the Thesians, flowing metal structures from the Nexari, and organic biodomes from the Krillians. In the center stood a simple human design, a circular garden with real earth flowers. Queen Zephyra walked through her private chambers, wearing traditional Valdorian robes that shifted color like liquid mercury. Her advisors bustled around her, making final preparations. Through the large window, she could see the human ship approaching, a small, simple vessel that looked almost primitive compared to the massive warships surrounding it. "Your Majesty," said her chief advisor, a tall being with blue-green skin, "it is not too late to reconsider. The human delegation is so small. Only 12 individuals. No honor guard, no display of strength. The other kings will see this as weakness." Zephyra touched the window, watching the human ship dock. "Perhaps that is the point, Advisor Kelm. They show no need to impress or threaten. That might be its own kind of strength." In the Great Hall, representatives from all 7 kingdoms had gathered. The atmosphere was tense despite the ceremonial decorations. King Vrex sat with his Krillian warriors, their insect-like forms clicking with barely contained aggression. Prime Conductor Azal floated in his energy containment field, occasionally flickering with displeasure. The Deshan collective hummed in harmonies that made the crystal decorations resonate. The human delegation entered last. 12 people in simple blue uniforms, walking calmly despite being surrounded by some of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. At their head walked Marcus Rivera. He was not impressive by alien standards. Average height for a human, brown hair starting to show gray at the edges, dark eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He carried no weapons, wore no armor, showed no energy emanations. In his hand was a small leather notebook and a simple writing tool. King Vrex leaned toward his general. "This is what our queen will marry. It looks like he would break if I touched him." But Prime Conductor Azal was watching more carefully. There was something about the way the human moved, the way his eyes cataloged everything he saw. "He observes much," Azal noted quietly. Marcus approached Queen Zephyra and bowed in perfect Valdorian formal style. Not too deep to show submission, not too shallow to show disrespect. When he spoke, it was in flawless Valdorian, with the correct accent for speaking to royalty. "Your Majesty honors me with this trust. I hope to prove worthy of it." Zephyr smiled. His pronunciation was better than some of her own nobles. "You studied our language?" "And customs and history," Marcus replied. He switched to the clicking speech of the Krillians as he greeted King Vrex, then to the harmonic tones needed for the Deshans. Each greeting was culturally perfect. The wedding ceremony began at sunset, when Asphode's 3 moons created the traditional triangle of unity in the sky. According to ancient law, the couple had to complete 7 different challenges, one from each kingdom, to prove their bond was strong enough for marriage. The first challenge came from the Deshans. The couple had to navigate their harmonic maze while blindfolded, following only the sound frequencies generated by crystal formations. Most aliens needed psychic abilities or enhanced hearing to complete this task. Marcus closed his eyes and listened. Instead of trying to hear the specific frequencies, he listened to how sounds bounced off the maze walls. He had learned echolocation techniques during his military training for dark operations. He guided Queen Zephyra through the maze by touch and whispered directions, completing the challenge faster than anyone expected. The Krillian challenge was next, withstanding their pain tolerance trial. Participants had to hold their hands in a bioelectrical field that gradually increased in intensity. Most beings used mental disciplines or natural resistance to endure it. Marcus used breathing techniques and muscle control he had learned during survival training. When the pain grew intense, he did not fight it but accepted it, redirecting his focus to other sensations. He lasted longer than 3 of the alien ambassadors who had attempted the challenge in previous ceremonies. Each challenge revealed something unexpected. During the Molten Clan's strength test, Marcus used leverage and physics instead of raw power. For the Void Hunter's stealth trial, he moved like someone trained in wilderness survival. In the Nexary's logic puzzle, he approached the problem from angles that pure mathematics could not reach. By the time the 7th challenge was complete, the alien representatives were murmuring among themselves. This human was not what they had expected. The final ceremony took place in the central garden. As tradition demanded, each kingdom's representative had to declare their acceptance of the union. One by one, the alien leaders stood and gave formal approval, though many did so with obvious reluctance. King Vrex was the last to speak. "I accept this marriage, though I do not understand it. The human shows unexpected capabilities." Marcus and Queen Zephyra exchanged vows using a combination of all 7 languages. When they kissed to seal the bond, the gathered aliens made various sounds of approval, confusion, or mild disgust, depending on their species. But the real negotiations began after the ceremony in the Great Council Chamber. The 7 kingdoms had territorial disputes that needed resolution. Trade routes had to be redefined. Old grievances needed addressing. King Vrex immediately demanded expanded borders in the Outer Rim territories. "The Krillian Horde needs more space for our growing population. We claim the Zeta-7 system." "Impossible," hissed Prime Conductor Azal. "That system contains rare energy crystals that belong to the Nexari Dominion. We will bend space itself before allowing Krillian expansion." The Theshan collective sang their disagreement in harsh, discordant notes. The Molten clans roared their own claims. Within minutes, the chamber erupted in the same arguments that had been going on for months. Marcus sat quietly beside Queen Zephyra, writing in his leather notebook with what appeared to be a primitive pen. The alien leaders barely noticed him as they shouted and threatened each other. "The Void Hunters have been raiding our supply ships," accused the Theshan Prime Singer. "Prove it," whispered the Void Hunter representative, their voice like wind through empty space. "We have sensor logs," King Vrex clicked angrily, "but they show ships using Nexari energy signatures." "Impossible," Azal flared. "Our energy patterns cannot be faked." Marcus looked up from his notebook. "Actually, they can be." His quiet voice somehow carried through the chamber, despite all the noise. "The ships you detected were using modified energy cores that mimic Nexari frequencies while operating on Void Hunter stealth technology." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human. "How could you possibly know this?" Prime Conductor Azal demanded. Marcus flipped through his notebook. "I've been listening to your accusations and comparing them to the attack patterns you've described. Someone has been using ships that combine technologies from different kingdoms to attack supply lines. They want you to blame each other." King Vrex leaned forward. "You determined this from all words?" "With no sensor data or intelligence reports." "Pattern recognition," Marcus explained simply. "On Earth, we call it detective work. Someone is playing all of you against each other. The question is who and why?" Queen Zephyra looked at her new husband with growing respect. In one evening, he had completed 7 impossible challenges and identified a threat that has escaped the notice of 7 different intelligence agencies. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Marcus closed his notebook and looked around the chamber. "We need to find out who's behind the raids. But more importantly, we need to understand why they want you fighting each other. What happens if this war actually starts?" The alien leaders exchanged glances. For the first time in months, they were all thinking about the same problem instead of fighting about different ones. Outside the council chamber, unknown ships moved through the darkness between stars, watching and waiting. The wedding had created something unexpected. Unity where there had been only division. But there were forces in the galaxy that preferred chaos to peace, and they would not allow this new alliance to grow strong. The real test of the marriage was about to begin. 3 days after the wedding, the attack came without warning. The Krillian supply convoy was traveling through what should have been safe space, carrying medical supplies and food to colonies in the Outer Rim. 15 cargo ships protected by 5 war vessels. all equipped with the latest Krillian bio-armor and defensive systems. They never had a chance. The attackers struck from hyperspace, appearing in formations that seemed to know exactly where each Krillian ship would be. Energy weapons sliced through bio-armor like it was paper. Missiles found weak points that should have been impossible to target. In 12 minutes, the entire convoy was destroyed. Only one escape pod survived to tell the story. Queen Zephyra received the emergency communication while having breakfast with Marcus on the palace terrace. The holographic image of King Rex appeared, his insect features twisted with rage and grief. 300 of my people are dead, he clicked furiously. Families, workers, children traveling to new homes. All murdered by cowards who strike from shadows. Who was responsible? Zephyra asked, though she feared the answer. The energy signatures matched Nexori weapons, Rex snarled. Combined with Void Hunter stealth technology and Deshan harmonic disruptors. This was a joint attack by our supposed allies. Before Zephyra could respond, Prime Conductor Azal's image flickered into existence beside Rex. The Nexari Dominion denies all involvement. We do not attack medical convoys. Check your sensors again, insect. I know what I saw, Rex shot back. Nexari energy beams and Void Hunter cloaking. Your people and the Shadow Dwellers worked together to slaughter innocents. The Void Hunter representative materialized like smoke. The Hunters take no part in mass killing. We are not animals. Within an hour, representatives from all 7 kingdoms had gathered in the council chamber. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Fear and anger filled the room like poison gas. The fragile trust built during the wedding was cracking. Marcus sat beside Queen Zephyra, his leather notebook open, writing steadily as each leader spoke. He had been doing this since the emergency session began, capturing every word, every gesture, every reaction. The Deshan Prime Singer's crystal voice rang with accusation. Our harmonic sensors detected Molten Clan thermal signatures in the attack zone. The Fire Dwellers joined this alliance of murderers. Lies, rumbled the Molten Chief. Our ships were defending our own colonies during the attack time. We have sensor logs to prove it. Sensor logs can be faked, hissed the Nexari conductor. Not ours. The Molten Chief roared, his voice like a volcano erupting. Marcus looked up from his notebook. May I see the survivor's testimony? King Rex's image flickered with annoyance. Human, this is not your concern. These are matters of war between kingdoms. Actually, Queen Zephyra said firmly, as my husband and representative of Earth, his opinions matter to me. Show him the testimony. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. The survivor, a young Krillian named Zek, told his story with shaking voice. He described ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter Krillian defenses, and attackers who knew the convoy's exact route and schedule. Marcus watched the testimony 3 times, writing notes. Then he asked to see the sensor data from the battle site and the technical analysis of the weapons used. You cannot understand our technology, Prime Conductor Azal said dismissively. Human science is centuries behind ours. You're right, Marcus agreed. I don't understand your technology, but I understand patterns of behavior. He stood and moved to the holographic display, pointing to specific details in the data. Look at the attack formation. The enemy ships position themselves to create crossfire zones, but they also position themselves to avoid hitting each other with their own weapons. Of course, King Rex clicked impatiently. Basic military tactics. Yes, but look closer, Marcus continued. Each ship type used weapons specifically designed to counter one kingdom's defenses. Nexari energy beams for Krillian bioarmor. Void Hunter's stealth to approach unseen. Deshan harmonics to disrupt communications. Molten Clan thermal charges to prevent escape. The chamber fell silent as the Implications sank in. This attack required perfect coordination between technologies that have never been combined before, Marcus explained. It also required detailed knowledge of Krillian convoy schedules, defensive capabilities, and patrol routes. What are you suggesting? The Void Hunter representative whispered. Marcus flipped through his notebook, showing pages covered with neat handwriting and simple diagrams. I'm suggesting that whoever did this has been studying all of your species for a long time. They know your weapons, your tactics, your weaknesses, and they want you to blame each other. Prime Conductor Uzzle's energy form flickered rapidly. Impossible. No single force has access to all our technologies. Maybe not your current technologies, Marcus said quietly. But what about older ones? What if someone had access to all your historical databases, your old weapon designs, your previous military strategies? Queen Zephyra leaned forward. What do you mean? Marcus opened his notebook to a page covered with timeline notations. I've been studying galactic history since we arrived. 3,000 years ago, there was another spacefaring civilization in this region. They were called the predecessors, and they had contact with early versions of all your species. The predecessors are extinct, the Theshan Prime Singer chimed. Their worlds are empty ruins. Their biological forms are extinct, Marcus corrected. But what if they preserved themselves in another way? What if they uploaded their consciousness into artificial systems and waited for the right time to return? The silence in the chamber was complete. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to pause. King Vrex was the first to speak. You believe dead beings have returned to start a war? This sounds like human fiction. Marcus turned to a fresh page in his notebook and began writing. Let me ask you something. Why attack a medical convoy? Why not a military target or a strategic installation? To send a message, the Molten Chief growled. What message? That the attackers are cruel? That doesn't help them win a war. Marcus looked around the chamber. But if the goal is to make you angry at each other, to break the peace treaty, to start a war between your kingdoms, then attacking innocents and making it look like your enemies, then it makes perfect sense. Prime Conductor Ajal began shifting through rapid color changes, a sign of deep thinking. If such beings existed, what would they want? Marcus closed his notebook and faced the assembly. The same thing every returning empire wants. Their old territory back. All of it. He gestured toward the star map display. 3,000 years ago, the predecessors controlled this entire region of space. Every world your kingdoms now occupy was once theirs. If they've been waiting and watching, if they've been learning about your modern capabilities while you forgot about them, they could take it all back while we destroy each other in civil war. Queen Zephyra finished. The chamber erupted in concerned voices from all 7 kingdoms. For the first time since the emergency began, they were not arguing with each other, but discussing a common threat. Marcus raised his hand for attention. There's something else. The attack patterns show they're testing your responses. This wasn't about destroying one convoy. It was about seeing how you react, how you coordinate, how quickly you turn on each other. Which means they will attack again, the Void Hunter representative whispered. Soon, Marcus agreed. And next time, they'll use what they learned from your reactions to cause even more damage. King Vrex's mandibles clicked rapidly. If you are correct, human, then we face an enemy that knows all our secrets while we know nothing of theirs. Not nothing, Marcus said, opening his notebook again. They made mistakes. Small ones, but mistakes. They assumed you would react like your ancestors did 3,000 years ago. They didn't account for how your societies have changed, how your technology has evolved. He showed them his notes, pages of observations about subtle inconsistencies in the attack data. They also didn't account for humans. They've been studying your species for millennia, but they've only known about us for 3 years. We're an unknown variable in their calculations." Queen Zephyra looked at her husband with growing amazement. In 3 days of marriage, he had identified a threat that the galaxy's best military minds had missed completely. "What do you recommend we do?" she asked. Marcus smiled for the first time since the emergency began. "We give them more unknown variables than they can handle. We change the rules of the game completely. Outside, in the dark spaces between stars, ancient sensors detected the changing patterns of communication between the 7 kingdoms. The artificial minds that had waited 3 millennia for revenge began calculating new attack strategies, but for the first time in their long existence, they encountered something their vast databases could not predict: the creative chaos of human thinking. And that unknown factor would soon prove more dangerous to their plans than any weapon the galaxy possessed. The second attack came exactly 72 hours after the first, just as Marcus had predicted. This time, the target was an XRE research station studying energy crystals in a remote star system. The attackers destroyed the facility completely, but not before sending a message to every communication device in the galaxy. Queen Zephyra watched the holographic recording with Marcus and the assembled alien leaders. The image showed a being of pure light speaking with a voice like digital thunder. "Children of the second evolution," the entity said, its words carrying harmonics that made the air vibrate. "You inhabit worlds that belong to the first dominion. Your expansion ends now. Withdraw to your original star systems or face complete elimination." The image flickered and changed, showing massive ships emerging from hyperspace near the destroyed research station. The vessels looked like nothing anyone had seen before, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, covered in weapon arrays that defied current understanding of physics. "We are the predecessors you forgot," the voice continued. "We have watched your primitive civilization stumble through the stars we once ruled. Your chaotic expansion ends now. Submit or be removed." The transmission ended with coordinates and a time limit: 72 hours to begin evacuation of all contested systems. Prime Conductor Azal was the first to speak. "Their ships? I have never seen energy manipulation like that. Those weapon systems should not be physically possible. 3,000 years of technological development." King Vrex clicked grimly. "While we fought over scraps, they perfected war." Marcus had been studying the technical readouts while the others discussed political implications. Now, he looked up from his notes with an expression the aliens had not seen before: excitement. "They made a mistake," he announced. The chamber fell silent. The Molten Chief rumbled. "What mistake?" "They destroyed an entire research station in minutes. They revealed themselves too early," Marcus explained, standing and walking to the holographic display. "Look at their ultimatum: 72 hours to evacuate contested systems. That's not enough time to move entire populations, and they know it. So they intend to commit genocide," the Theshan Prime Singer chimed sadly. "No," Marcus said, his voice growing more confident. "They intend to force a surrender. They want your infrastructure intact, your populations alive to serve them. But they also want to avoid a long war because they're not as strong as they appear." Queen Zephyra leaned forward. "Explain." Marcus pointed to details in the ship recordings. "Those vessels are impressive, but look at the numbers. 12 ships to destroy 1 research station. If they had unlimited resources, they would have sent hundreds to make a statement. Instead, they sent just enough to do the job. 12 ships destroyed our most advanced facility," Azal pointed out. "Because they knew exactly what defenses it had," Marcus replied. "They've been studying you for millennia, remember? They know every weakness, every standard response pattern. But what happens when you don't follow standard patterns?" King Vrex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You suggest we fight unpredictably. I suggest we fight like humans, Marcus said with a smile. Our species never had overwhelming advantages like yours. We couldn't manipulate energy like the Nixari, or sing matter into new shapes like the Beshans. We survived by being adaptable, unpredictable, and creative. Over the next 2 days, Marcus began training mixed species teams in what he called human warfare doctrine. The aliens found the concepts difficult to understand. Explain again why we would deliberately waste resources. Prime Conductor Azo asked during a strategy session. Marcus was teaching them about feints and misdirection. Because your enemy expects you to be efficient. When you waste resources in one area, they assume it's a mistake and focus their attention there. Meanwhile, your real attack comes from somewhere else. The Veshan Prime Singer struggled with the concept of intentional chaos. Our harmonies are based on perfect coordination. How can chaos be more effective than order? Because perfect coordination is predictable, Marcus explained. Your enemy can calculate what you'll do next. But if you introduce controlled randomness, their calculations become worthless. The training sessions were unlike anything the Galactic Kingdoms had ever experienced. Marcus taught Krillian warriors to fight like guerrillas instead of in formation. He showed Nexari energy manipulators how to create false signatures that would confuse sensors. He worked with Void Hunters to use their stealth, abilities for misdirection rather than simple hiding. Most challenging was teaching them to work together in completely new ways. The Krillians and Nexari cannot fight side by side, King Vrex objected. Our bioarmor interferes with their energy fields. Good, Marcus said, surprising everyone. That interference can be a weapon. When Krillian bioarmor interacts with Nexari energy, it creates unpredictable field fluctuations. Instead of avoiding this, we use it to scramble enemy sensors. Queen Zephyra watched her husband work with growing amazement. He was transforming the galaxy's greatest military minds into something entirely new. Warriors trained for millennia in traditional tactics were learning to think like humans, flexible, creative, and completely unpredictable. The test came sooner than expected. On the second day of training, long-range sensors detected a massive First Dominion fleet approaching the Voldorian home system. 48 ships, each one larger than anything in the current galactic fleet. Their estimated arrival time was 18 hours. This is it, King Vrex clicked grimly as the alien leaders gathered for emergency council. They come to make good on their ultimatum. Our combined fleets cannot match their firepower, Prime Conductor Azal stated. Traditional tactics will fail against their superior technology. Marcus stood at the tactical display, reviewing fleet positions and defense capabilities. The numbers looked impossible. The First Dominion had overwhelming advantages in technology, firepower, and numbers. You're right, he said finally. Traditional tactics will fail, so we won't use them. He began outlining a battle plan that made no sense to anyone except Queen Zephyra, who had started to understand how her husband's mind worked. You want us to scatter our forces? The Molten Chief rumbled in confusion. Divide our strength when facing a superior enemy? I want you to make them think we're divided, Marcus corrected, while actually coordinating in ways they can't predict or counter. The plan was complex and seemed suicidal. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the Allied fleet would spread across the entire star system in seemingly random patterns. Each ship would operate independently, following no standard formation or tactical doctrine. This is madness, King Vrex protested. Our ships will be destroyed one by one. Only if they can predict where each ship will be, Marcus replied. But if every ship commander makes decisions based on immediate local conditions instead of overall strategy, the enemy can't calculate our movements. Queen Zephyra made the final decision. We implement Marcus's plan. Signal all fleet commanders. Abandon standard doctrine and fight like humans. When the first Dominion fleet arrived, they found exactly what they expected. A primitive defense force arranged in predictable formations around the planet. Their ancient sensors detected standard energy signatures, conventional weapon systems, and familiar tactical patterns. They began their attack with confidence born of 3 millennia of planning. First surprise came when the primitive ships suddenly scattered in directions that made no tactical sense. Instead of falling back to defensive positions, some ships charged directly at the attackers. Others fled toward empty space. Several groups began what appeared to be random maneuvers. The First Dominion's artificial minds began calculating new attack patterns. But every time they adapted to one group's behavior, another group would do something completely different. A squadron of Krillian fighters suddenly accelerated directly into White Naxari energy fields, creating electromagnetic chaos that blinded sensors for thousands of kilometers. Veshan crystal ships began singing in harmonies that had never been recorded, creating resonance patterns that interfered with the ancient ships' targeting systems. Void hunters appeared and disappeared in patterns that followed no stealth doctrine, while molten clan vessels used their heat signatures to create false targets that confused enemy missiles. For the first time in their existence, the First Dominion encountered something their vast databases could not predict or counter: the creative chaos of multiple species thinking like humans. The battle raged for 6 hours. By the end, 8 First Dominion ships had been destroyed, and the rest had retreated to hyperspace to recalculate their strategy. In the command center of Queen Zephora's flagship, Marcus sat quietly writing in his notebook while the alien commanders celebrated their impossible victory. "How did you know it would work?" Zephora asked her husband. Marcus looked up with tired but satisfied eyes. "Because chaos is humanity's greatest strength. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us in new ways every day. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to turn our weaknesses into advantages." He closed his notebook and stood. The First Dominion spent 3,000 years planning for every possibility except one: that their enemies might fight like humans. King Vrex approached, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine respect. "You have shown us something new, Marcus Rivera. Something powerful." I show the final message from the First Dominion came 3 weeks after their defeat at Valdoria. This time, there were no ultimatums or warnings. Just coordinates and a simple statement: "We come to reclaim what was always ours." Marcus stood in the war room aboard Queen Zephora's flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet movements across the galaxy. The scale of what approached defied imagination. Over 300 First Dominion vessels, including massive world ships that dwarfed anything ever built by the current civilizations. "They're not holding anything back this time," Admiral Kelm observed, his blue-green skin pale with worry. "Every ship we know about, plus dozens more that just appeared from somewhere." King Vrex's image flickered in the communication display. "My scouts report weapons platforms being activated in dead systems. They have been building for centuries while we remained ignorant." Marcus nodded, making notes in a new leather journal. His first one had been filled completely with tactical observations and strategic plans. "They learned from our last battle. They won't underestimate human unpredictability again." "Then how do we win?" Prime Conductor Azal asked. His energy form showed stress patterns that made him flicker between colors rapidly. "They have overwhelming force and 3,000 years of technological advancement." Marcus closed his journal and looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders. 3 weeks of training had changed them all. The rigid military thinking that had defined their species for millennia had been replaced with something more flexible and creative. "We don't fight them the way they expect," he said. "In fact, we don't fight them at all." The silence that followed was complete. Queen Zephyra was the first to speak. "Explain." Marcus moved to the tactical display, pointing to the approaching enemy formations. "Look at their strategy. It's perfect by traditional standards. Overwhelming force concentrated on strategic targets. They plan to destroy our military capability and force surrender, which they can easily do," the Molten Chief rumbled. "Only if we give them military targets to destroy," Marcus continued. "But what if there are no traditional targets? What if our entire strategy is based on something they can't comprehend?" Over the next hour, Marcus outlined a plan that seemed impossible even by human standards. Instead of gathering their forces for massive battles, the Allied kingdoms would scatter completely. Every ship, every station, every military asset would spread across thousands of star systems. "You're talking about abandoning everything," the Vishan Prime Singer chimed in distress. "Our worlds, our homes, our entire civilization." "Temporarily," Marcus corrected. "And not abandoning, relocating. We turn the entire galaxy into a network instead of fixed positions." The plan was audacious beyond belief. Using a combination of human organizational techniques and alien technology, they would create a mobile civilization. Nexari energy manipulation would power massive transport systems. Krillian biotechnology would create living ships capable of supporting entire populations. Veshan harmonic engineering would coordinate communications across impossible distances. "The First Dominion expects to conquer static targets," Marcus explained. "Planets, stations, fixed defenses. But how do you conquer something that's constantly moving? How do you rule a people who refuse to stay in one place?" King Vrex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the implications. Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. Instead of hiding in forests and mountains, we hide in the spaces between stars. "More than that," Marcus said with growing excitement. "We turn their greatest strength against them. They have superior technology, but technology requires resources, maintenance, supply lines. What happens when there are no fixed targets to capture? No infrastructure to control?" Queen Zephyra began to smile as she understood. "They become an army with nothing to conquer." The next few days were a frenzy of preparation, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire populations began evacuating their home worlds, but not in panic, in coordination. Human logistics experts worked with alien engineers to create mobile cities that could travel between stars. The Krillians grew massive bioships capable of sustaining millions of lives. The Nexari created energy fields that could move entire fleets instantaneously across vast distances. The Veshans composed songs that turned asteroid fields into temporary colonies. But Marcus had one more surprise. "Earth wants to contribute something special," he announced during a planning session. "We're sending our entire space fleet to join the Alliance." The alien leaders looked confused. Earth's space capability was minimal compared to galactic standards, a few hundred small ships with primitive technology. "With respect, Marcus," Prime Conductor Azal said carefully, "your ships cannot match First Dominion weapons." Marcus smiled. "You're right. Our ships are primitive, underpowered, and completely outmatched." He paused for effect. "Which is exactly why they'll work." When the human fleet arrived, the aliens finally understood what Marcus meant. Every ship was different. Some were military vessels, others were converted cargo haulers. Some used fusion drives, others had experimental engines that barely functioned. Many were held together with improvised repairs and creative engineering. "This is your mighty fleet?" King Vrex asked in bewilderment. "This is human engineering," Marcus replied proudly. "Every ship built by different people, using different techniques with different capabilities. No two are exactly alike. The genius of it became clear during the first engagement with First Dominion scouts. The ancient artificial minds tried to analyze human ship capabilities and found themselves faced with chaos. Every vessel behaved differently, used different technologies, even flew with different physics principles. Some human ships were fast, others were slow. Some had powerful shields, others relied on maneuverability. A few had weapons that shouldn't have worked according to any known science, but did work because humans had built them anyway. The First Dominion scouts retreated, their sensors overloaded with contradictory data. The main battle began in the Nexus sector, where 7 star systems formed a natural choke point for galactic travel. The First Dominion arrived expecting to find the Allied fleet waiting in defensive positions. Instead, they found empty space. For 6 hours, 300 massive warships searched for an enemy that seemed to have vanished. Then the attacks began. Small groups of ships appeared from hyperspace, struck at the edges of the First Dominion formation, and disappeared before retaliation could arrive. But these weren't traditional hit-and-run attacks. Each group used completely different tactics. Kryllian bioships emerged from the hulks of dead planets, having camouflaged themselves as natural debris. Nexari energy manipulators created false signatures that made one ship appear to be 20. Void hunters struck from directions that should have been impossible to approach from dot, and everywhere, human ships appeared like ghosts. Some attacked alone, others in groups. Some used conventional weapons. Others had improvised systems that created effects the First Dominion had never encountered. A converted human cargo ship named Lucky Strike disabled a First Dominion dreadnought by ramming it with a cargo bay full of Veshan resonance crystals. The collision created harmonic feedback that overloaded the ancient ship systems. Another human vessel, a scientific research ship called Curiosity, defeated an entire squadron by using its experimental FTL drive to create gravitational anomalies that pulled enemy ships out of formation. The First Dominion's artificial minds began calculating frantically, trying to adapt to patterns that had no patterns. Every time they developed a counter strategy, their enemies would do something completely different. The battle raged for 3 days across 7 star systems. By the end, the First Dominion had lost over half their fleet to an enemy they never managed to pin down or fully engage. But the real victory came when Marcus revealed the final phase of the plan. Now, we show them what humans really are, he announced from the command deck of Queen Zephyr's flagship. Across the galaxy, the scattered mobile civilization began to converge on the remaining First Dominion forces. But they didn't come as separate kingdoms or species. They came as one unified force that combined every strength and covered every weakness. Kryllian bioships carried Nexari energy cores powered by Veshan harmonic resonances. Human-designed weapon systems were enhanced with molten clam thermal technology and guided by Void Hunter stealth capabilities. The ships themselves had been modified using human engineering principles. No two were exactly alike, but all worked together in perfect imperfect harmony. The final engagement lasted only 4 hours. When it ended, the surviving First Dominion vessels were in full retreat toward the galactic rim, their ancient confidence shattered by encounters with an enemy that refused to follow any rules they understood. In the aftermath, as the Allied fleets regrouped and began the process of rebuilding, Queen Zephyra found Marcus on the observation deck of their ship, writing in his journal and watching the stars. "What are you recording?" she asked, settling beside him. "The end of one era and the beginning of another," Marcus replied. 3 weeks ago, 7 alien kingdoms married a primitive human to create a temporary peace. Today, those same kingdoms discovered that humans aren't primitive.